Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke. But I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
All right, I'm still with Melanie, Diotte, and like I shared in the first episode, I found her on the internet, and it was as a result of this article entitled, "When Toxic Means Throwing Away Your Parents, We Need to Talk." And I'm reading this just because she's calling in from Canada, and I just want it to be as clear as possible. So here we go. You ready, Melanie?
I'm ready.
I came across a post a few hours ago in a millennial mom group that stopped me in my tracks. A woman shared she was thinking of going no contact with her mother because she found her toxic. She described her mom as quite toxic and even wished her mother was dead because she couldn't handle her mom's emotional needs and physical needs. By needs, she meant driving her around because her mom couldn't drive, and by keeping her company. As a life coach, I asked what she meant by toxic because context matters. Some people have every reason to go no contact, but I'm not referring to those experiencing extreme harm or abuse. I'm going to speak frankly. Some of you need to do much better for your parents. I understand this might not be a popular opinion with some younger people, but after all I've seen and experienced, I feel it's important to speak openly and honestly about this. My first question was, what does toxic mean to you? Words like that carry heavy weight. I've seen people cut ties because it was absolutely essential, but lately I'm mostly seeing it happen for the most ridiculous reasons. When a child goes no contact, it often feels like a death to the parent. Absolute pure heartbreak and grief. In this case, the reasons given were not enough hugs growing up, her mom not knowing how to drive or swim, and being emotionally needy. She was too busy as a mom of 3 to handle her mom's emotional needs. I gently pointed out that wishing death on a parent for those reasons is extreme. Many people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond are dealing with menopause, depression, loneliness, physical limitations, diseases, cancer, arthritis, you name it. Many are also grieving deep losses, like the loss of a partner, parent, sibling. The list goes on, and most never have access to the emotional tools we have today. Gen X was raised by boomers who were raised by the silent generation. Emotional distance and even extreme harm were unfortunately common. Many did the best they could, but emotional skills weren't passed down. That doesn't erase the hurt, but it helps explain it. In many cultures, aging parents live with their adult children, and not out of duty, but out of love and reciprocity. In Western culture, we've seemed to not only forget that bond, but erase it. This generation absolutely deserves boundaries to protect their well-being, but boundaries don't mean throwing parents away. Love, compassion, understanding, tolerance, and empathy are essential, especially when expecting someone to change at 50, 60, or 70 years old is unrealistic. Let them be who they are. They're not going to change. Imagine your children throwing you away because you can't drive anymore or because you've become annoying. Because Gen X didn't always learn the tools they needed, and many of us grew up in dysfunctional families, we tried something different, gentle parenting. Perhaps, in trying to be kinder, we may have unintentionally entitled our children or given them too much. Some kids embraced it and didn't take advantage, while others became entitled. Maybe they were simply too kind. Love and take care of your parents while you can, because they don't have much time left on the planet. If you're doing this to your parents, imagine what your kids will do to you. Western culture and this generation, something has to change. Otherwise, the whole family unit is going to fall apart. Best regards, Melanie. Comment on your own article.
I'm sorry, Joanne, what did you say?
Comment on your own article.
Comment on my own article? Well, I mean, after I saw that post, Joanne, I just felt compelled. I just felt absolutely heartbroken for this mom. I like true empathy, because I myself have been called annoying or too much, and I wanted to put it out there that, well, one day you're going to be annoying and too much, and want to teach this generation, whether it be millennial or Gen Z, empathy and compassion, and I'm trying to understand why they're so angry at us. And where I found the article is a group on Facebook called Perfect Moms, and that person who had written about her toxic mom shut down she deleted her post, and then I decided to share my article on that specific group, which is mostly millennial moms. And it was not well received. The negative comments I gotten were just were heartbreaking, and I decided myself to shut it down. But then I posted it on a bigger network, TikTok, and I'm very, very new to TikTok, so I don't, I'm not the best at doing this, but that article or blog post, whatever you want to call it, now has over, I could check this morning, I think it had 91,000 views, 3,000 comments, and about 5,000 likes or hearts, whatever you want to call it. So it's obviously a topic that needs to be discussed.
Blown open.
It's an issue that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, families are going to become completely broken. So, this mom group, I took it down, but we're talking, a few Canadian moms, maybe 20,000 of them, who are just not open to healing. But, when I opened it up to a bigger group like TikTok, very, very surprised to see the response that I got, and want to continue on this path with you to teach healing and empathy, and to teach this new generation, and to let them know what we've gone through. And even though we may have caused some unintentional hurt, we love our kids, and we deserve to be loved too.
I agree, but you and I right now are absolutely in alignment, but here's where I think I go a little left of center. I understand why that group, especially daughters and sons too, because they typically are married to women, are on fire about this. They don't have the resources. They don't get a lot of support from other siblings. So parents, whether it's unconscious or not, there's certain parts, like you described, are conscious. That young woman you mentioned is making a conscious decision to think those things about her mother. But what's going on underneath the surface is a lot of things that these kids, adults, young adults, 40-year-olds, haven't faced within themselves, because we're only just facing it in ourselves. You with me?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. In regards to resources, you and I had zero resources, right? We didn't have the internet. We had remember those encyclopedias when we needed to look something up? This is where we went.
Antiquated psychology.
Yeah, or advice from our friends or older siblings. So we didn't have the resources. So I feel that they may have the resources, but
the resources are. I'm cutting you off, but the resources are capitalizing on them because.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing now, because as I mentioned, I'm new to TikTok, is these new therapists giving them advice on TikTok and social media, on Instagram, and encouraging them, to heal their trauma, but not by healing by understanding and empathy and compassion, but through cutting ties. So I guess my since writing this article, my algorithm has changed, and it's all about either estranged parents talking. Like, one is called the doormat mom. She commented on my post that this is not talked about enough, or children actually recording their parents while their parents not knowing, and what's going on in the household, and posting it on social media.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so you're right. They do have the right resources, but are they reaching out to the right resources? And some of these resources are capitalizing on our children.
That's always been the case with psychology, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's just our generation's pointing it out that it's antiquated. I know for myself. I'm not trying to go there now, but that's one of the reasons I'm doing this and writing my book, because I'm trying to spare grief and incite joy. Conceivably, in your 20s, you should individuate, but we now have 40-year-olds trying to individuate on the heels of our late individuation. You know what I'm trying to say? So I don't resent the 20-something individuating nearly as much, because I recognize at least they're doing it at the right age. It's just unfortunate that they're being influenced by folks that haven't done their own individuation. And that's what I see as the fight. They're looking to people older and wiser who aren't. And it's funny to me. I try to make this shit funny because it's just so obvious to me. And then, parents like us just have to wait and see, and also own up to our own shortcomings and our mistakes. I was apologizing for mistakes too soon. I was like, oh, shit, caught that. Let me apologize for that before I was even asked for an apology. And then when I was asked, I responded, but they don't always view it as genuine. They don't understand the grief we carry, and they are trying to understand their own grief that they carry, which is ours. It's a quandary.
It is. And what toxic means to you and I, or Gen X and boomers, doesn't mean the same to them at all.
Right. Because emotional and covert things do the most damage.
And, some of these TikTok therapists or Instagram therapists just throw around the word trauma and toxic too much. I mean, you tell your kid, listen, clean up your room, clean up the dishes, make your bed. I have these expectations. And all of a sudden you're called toxic.
Yeah, I know.
Or that's trauma.
Yeah.
Whereas, Gen X or boomers, I mean, if we didn't make our bed or do what we were told to do, just yesterday, there was consequences and severe consequences. I took a little country drive to my partner's childhood country place yesterday. And I guess there's a lot of memories that came up. And he's 60. And his parents were immigrants from Sicily. And he's just showing me around, and this is the house, and this is the lake, and this is where I did this, and this is where I did that. And I said, God, you came here till you were 18? And he said, yeah. And I said, you must have been bored as a teen, because there was literally nothing to do there. And he said, tell me about it. And he said, when I turned 18, I told my father, I'm not going this weekend. I said, what? He said, I'm not going this weekend. And there were severe consequences for that. And he said he remembers being extremely sore on his whole ride to the country. So this is where I say, not that I'm blaming, you know, Gen Z or Gen X, but there's a huge difference between their trauma and our trauma.
Right. But as I say, and this is again where you and I may differ, and I'm just pointing out that is a physical consequence. The consequences today are emotional and psychological and more covert.
Mm-hmm.
That's why these kids are reeling, because I'm still reeling from covert abuse. How could I have known not to do certain things? I'll give you an example, and it's one of the most cruel things I ever did to one of my children that had to be pointed out to me. I used to reference their behavior as their father's, and a lot of people do that. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're
I
saying.
would go so far, and I'm going to cry because this hurt my kid. I don't know if I can do it here. I'll save it for the book, because if I say it out loud, I'll cry for too long. But by the time he could tell me how much it hurt him, he was probably 15. And from there, I cleaned up my act as best I could. But I recognize I did what I did because I felt like I was making him aware of the abusive behavior, whereas I was inadvertently calling him an abuser. And once I caught it, you know, I was devastated, but it's not something, I mean, if he heard it once, he heard it 50 times. And that is, and I realize I'm being vague, but I just think we when we are trying to forgive and this is where I'm going to go, unless you want to stay on towards the end of the week, I'm going to get to how we have to look at ourselves. I know I didn't repeat the same amount of psychological and emotional abuse that was done to me, but I will tell you that was much harder than anything physical I could have experienced within the framework of family. And I know people who have experienced physical and sexual abuse never get to the covert parts. So it's about having a huge respect for physical abuse. But it's the covert stuff that does the most damage.
Well, Joanne, I thank you for sharing that with me. You know, I think you need to forgive yourself for that. I think it's amazing that you've acknowledged that you made those mistakes. And I'm not making excuses for you or me, but again, we didn't have the tools to do this.
No.
You know, you and I have had a couple private conversations, and we're both single moms, right? Had some difficult relationships, and you know, sometimes we may have seen behaviors. A psychologist once told me that you know, just remember that your child is 50% you and 50% your husband. So whatever you say badly about your husband, you know, you're talking about them too. This is part of them.
Their DNA.
Yeah, and the psychologist, you know, I had to catch myself doing that too, and I did it a lot. But you were very, very brave to, you know, acknowledge that you did that. But I guess you saw behaviors that you didn't like, and this was the only way you knew how to correct it.
I was involved in such intense domestic violence. There was no way I speak to all of us who've experienced domestic violence of any kind. There is no way you can, reactive abuse to domestic violence is one of the most premier types of re-abusing the next generation, reacting to it. So I consider that part of reactive abuse. So inadvertently, we both look like the abusers. And I have forgiven myself. That's a big part of the reason I'm doing this and writing the book. But I'm also telling my truth, which stands to hurt others, because I have to get the poison out of me. I have to.
But Joanne, your intent was good. Your intent was, listen, you don't speak to women like this, right? We were trying to raise our children to do better, right? To be better people. And our parents certainly didn't give us the tools to do this. And, the difference
my siblings my parents were not my problem. It was my siblings.
You may have hurt children by doing this, but it was unintentional. So you absolutely have to forgive yourself. But hats off to you for acknowledging it. And I hope that, your children have forgiven you for it, because it was completely unintentional. And it was really to teach them something, right? That we don't treat women like this, so we don't behave this way. This is not how. And you were just doing it because you didn't want your kids to
repeat it,
to become abusive adults, right? We want our children to grow up to be good human beings, and that's how you were teaching them.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time with that kind of that type of and again, we're different people. I don't spend a lot of time in that mindset of talking to myself that way, how you just spoke, because I'm beyond needing validation for, I know why I did what I did. At this point, and I also want to make a comment about intention, because intention's been thrown in my face many times, because I've used the word intention, and I've had one of my children say, cock his head and go, that's a word that really hits home. Empathy, intention hits Gen Z in a way that's kind of annoying. They're kind of over us using those words, which I've been very sensitive to, because it's very easy to say my intention was good, but I still did it. So,
but intention and context do matter, Joanne, right? So, giving your kid a beating because they don't feel like going to the cottage, and correcting your child's behavior and saying, hey, well, now you sound like your father, context does matter.
It matters for healing, but it doesn't matter for their healing, which is why they've lost compassion for us. They're not interested in my CPTSD. They're not. They're in their 20s.
Well, this is where they need to be taught compassion. I mean,
this is where we see it differently, and I love the way that you see it for the sake of our listeners, because I think that's a really important part of healing. But just know that in order to forgive myself, I had to forgive the rationale for why it happened too. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm not trying to say it's one is better than the other. I'm just saying, I know that at this point in time, to choose me and be able to tell my story about what happened to me, I know my kids are on their own soul's journey. They got the information. Mm-hmm. What they do with it can no longer be dependent on me. It's on them at this point, and it's a longer journey for them than it was for us because of the nature of the damage. It was largely emotional. The physical stuff, it all trickles down. The physical, when we couldn't physically abuse our children, our abusers became more covert. Then we became more covert in our abuse. And it's got this weird trickle down thing that it's hitting our kids the hardest. And I'm just hoping they can recognize it and do something about it. I don't think they'll repeat it to their kids. So there's that.
There's definitely that. And, I don't know if we can share. I mean, I'd love to share some of the comments of the parents feeling, as I mentioned. I want to
do that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do that now?
Yes, I'm looking at Brian, who I only just realized shaved his legs, so I'm staring at his legs. And I didn't say fuck once, either did you. Fuck. There we go. There, and I appreciate you going toe to toe with me. I know I'm intense, so I thank you for that, because what we just did in the last 10 minutes really matters. Really matters.
It matters to our children, and it also matters to, some of these comments are from newly estranged moms, parents who are really grieving, don't understand, have no longer purpose in life. And these are people in their 50s and 60s. They're in the prime of their lives.
Right.
And they just don't know
whether to shit or go blind, as my mother used to say.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's stop, and we'll go into the third episode, and thank you.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. Jai Ma.